Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm an airline pilot, and today let's have another look into the Airbus flare and flight behavior. This time sitting in the ToLiss A320 Neo that a couple of you have asked me to do some patrons on. So before we start this, we have to take into account that the Neo is slightly different from the CEO, in that the Neo has, well, slightly different pitch and power settings, obviously. However, the general Patron approach should be around about the same, as a couple of Neo pilots have confirmed to me prior to starting this recording. On top of that, we need to take into account that the Neo has somewhat enhanced rotation law, in that it does not, or rather in that it does have somewhat of tail strike protection compared to the A320 CEO. So minor differences are expected, that is totally normal. But apart from that, I would say that we should get straight into the airplane, spread a little bit of love, and go flying. Alright, so we are just like in my first video with the A320 from the recent Phoenix update, standing in Croatia, in Rijeka, on runway 32, and we're about ready to depart. So overall, we've got rather similar weights. We're just about at 61 tons, and we've planned a flap 2 takeoff, and I've also entered the arrival information already on the approach page, as you can see over here. So we are going to start with a config 3 landing, just to have a look into what that should look like, and then after that we're going to do a config full, so that we have the complete picture. And if I deem necessary, then we might do a third pattern as well, just in case something comes up during this video that I have not planned for prior to the start of the recording. Okay then, parking breakers off, and then we are ready to go, take off. Man flag 60 SRS, auto thrust blue. Thrust set. .100 knots, checked. V1 rotates. So you need quite a bit more backstick here than you do in the Phoenix. Which of the two is correct? I'll leave for the rated pilots to decide. Okay, positive climb, gear up. Okay, it went into alt star straight away. Obviously it should not have done it that early, but nonetheless should be fine. Okay, flaps 1. Speed check, flaps 1. Alt. Okay then, let's turn downwind. So, comparing the ToLiss to the Phoenix, in the ToLiss you need quite a bit stronger stick inputs than in the Phoenix. Now, which of the two is correct for an A320 is something that I'll leave to people like V1 Simulations, who seem to like both equally, to decide. I'm sure looking at his streams he has some good inputs on that as a rated A320 captain. So, for our continuous plan, let's go ahead and activate the approach phase, and then let's go ahead and fly the approach. We're going to start with a flap 3 approach, so let's switch on landing flaps 3, and then we can go ahead and manage our speed once again. So here's what I do expect. The pitch on approach should be somewhere in the region around 4 degrees with a flap 3, and then on the approach itself we do need to flare like 2 degrees. According to the Flight Crew Techniques manual, it can be as much as 4 degrees, depending on what you look at. Also, a quick word here, since a couple of you said that I would be reducing my thrust to idle too late. Let me quickly talk about that for a second. So going into the A320 Flight Crew Techniques manual, here is what it says down there. At 20 feet, the retard auto callout reminds the pilot to retard thrust levers. It is a reminder rather than an order. When best adapted, the pilot will rapidly retard all thrust levers. Depending on the conditions, the pilot will retard earlier or later. However, the pilot must ensure that all thrust levers are at idle detent at the latest at touchdown to ensure ground spoiler extension at touchdown. In order to assess the rate of descent in flare, the aircraft's position relative to the ground, look well ahead of the aircraft. The typical pitch increment in the flare is approximately 4 degrees, which leads to a -1 degree flight path angle. Okay, so we are just about passing a beam the runway. Let's go ahead and start our timing. This is not as accurately flown here because I was a little bit focused on the flight crew technique manual there and reading that stuff to you. But nonetheless, it is a visual approach after all, so we are going to get there. Okay, so we're at 1500 AGL. Normally that's 45 seconds. However, I did miss the start of the timing a bit, so let's make it 35 seconds instead. Flaps 2. And by the way, look at that. I'm not touching my stick at all. This is how the airplane reacts to the extension of flaps 2. You can see there is really not that much of a pitch change and of a vertical speed change when the flaps are extended. Okay, gear down. Flaps 3. And that puts us straight into landing configuration. I'm going to leave the auto thrust on this one once again, and I will retard the thrust levers at 20 feet, which seems to work pretty well in about every add-on except for the Phoenix. So let's see how that is going to behave on this one. Okay, where's my field? Over there. Yeah, we really flew out a little bit too far. But I did find it important to show you exactly what the Flight Crew Techniques manual says about the flare, and therefore what I based the procedure on. Okay, so turning final. Let's see, we can slowly but steadily start the descent. Also, I will very quickly extend the center line over here. Give me a 140 roundabout, like so, because it does give us that VDEV dot over here, which helps us tracking the path, because the puppies aren't that easy to see in the sim as they are in the real world. Checked. Okay, here we are bang on the puppies, 2 red, 2 white. And looking at the pitch, you can see in order to maintain our 3-degree descent, we're looking at something like 2.5 or 3 degrees of pitch over here. So correcting downwards a tiny bit, as it feels to me like we're getting a bit high. So about 3 degrees pitch, as you can see. Okay, see? That's what I meant. That's how I do expect it to look like. Okay then, stand up. And take off. Man toga SRS go around track, auto thrust blue. Rotate. And see just about how much backstick I needed by looking at that cross there. Positive climb, gear up. Okay, we're gonna disregard that old star over there. At 1,200 I'll pitch it down. Like so. Speed, flaps 1. This is really where a second pilot would come in very handy. Unfortunately, not today though, so we'll just about have to do it like this. Okay then. So that looks about good. Then flight director's off, but on. And let's turn downwind once more. Okay, so pretty much the same procedure this time, but now we are going to use a config full approach. See what that's going to look like. So this time I do expect a little bit less of pitch, maybe a degree or two less on the approach, and I do expect that the airplane is going to settle down a little bit quicker because we have more drag coming in config full rather than config 3. Okay then, and this time the aim is to fly the procedure a little bit more accurate. So speed is managed. And this time we won't do any FCTM reading on the downwind. That's for sure. Okay, it might be a little close to the field there. We should be looking at something like 2.5 miles. On the other hand side, it does seem alright to me. Okay, cool. So here we are, downwind. Let's start preparing our stopwatch. And this time I'm also going to use an auto brake setting, because this time I actually want to bring the airplane to a stop. Okay then, there's our field. There's our threshold, a beam that will start the timing, 45 seconds. But I'm sure you've watched me fly so many Airbus patterns recently that you know that by now. Okay then, time to prepare the watch. About here is the threshold, so that is roughly here on our terrain. So pretty much now. Okay, timing. So let's see how that's gonna behave this time. By the way, look at how easy it is to maintain altitude with this thing. The Airbus fly-by-wire is really doing an amazing job. Okay then. Flaps 2. I'll just do it a little bit earlier and I'll show you that I'm not touching the stick on that. So look at how the system is able to compensate for the ballooning. You get a tiny climb there, but it also corrected a little bit on the pitch. And now that it's taking off the thrust, look at that, you immediately start descending again. Okay then, 45 seconds, let's make that left-hand turn. Then we can go gear down, flaps 3. So, should get a tiny descent here, a couple 100 feet a minute as we start coming in. Flaps full. Okay, center line is correctly extended. Okay, so config full, gear down. The memo is going to come at about 800 feet. Then we can start a shallow turn going final. And there is our runway. Okay, looking at the puppy, we are at 3 reds right now. Let's correct for that. Pitch up a tiny bit. Okay, now we're spot on. And here we are, looking good. Okay, so as you can see, pitch is a tiny bit less, maybe a degree or a degree and a half less than it was previously. I expect the airplane to flare a little bit less this time, so let's see how that is going to turn out. Okay, puppies 3 red, correcting for that. And overcorrected, obviously. Might...
50, 40, 30, 20,
okay, flare, idle. So look at that. This is what an Airbus flare looks like. Okay. Spoiler, reverse green, decel. 70 knots. Alright, so you can see the difference here. I pull the nose up by about the same angle as I did in the Phoenix, and you can see how the airplane didn't want to float into eternity like that, but rather settled down onto the runway rather quickly. And that is how I would expect it to behave. Alright, so this is what you guys asked for, the comparison with the ToLiss Airbus. Again, it is a Neo, so it is a tiny bit different, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, but you can certainly see where I went with this one. So, thank you for watching. I'm looking forward to see you all again on the next one. In the meantime, enjoy your flights, whichever Airbus you choose, and I'm looking forward to see you all again on the next one.